Welcome to the Trends and News channel, where we analyze the most important news and trends. Behind the headlines, there is much more than meets the eye. Today, we analyze peace negotiations regarding the war in Ukraine and the circumstances surrounding the achievement of peace.
Peace negotiations regarding the war in Ukraine. When the White House spokesperson announced that President Trump had a phone call with President Putin, everyone expected a Yalta type of negotiation at the highest level. However, negotiations are taking place at the level of delegations, partly because the current administration has a realistic view of geopolitics and diplomacy, and partly because it is aware of the responsibility of the U.S. for the situation on the ground. In the first part, President Trump knows that politics is a matter of what is possible at a given moment. And as a businessman, he knows that he must take the interests of the other side into account if he wants a long-term partnership, which the U.S. did not recognize in previous administrations. In the second part, when it comes to responsibility, we must take into account all the allegations of independent media and agencies that implied the involvement of the U.S. and the CIA in the events of the Maidan, then about the reports on the biolabs that were financed by the Department of Defense, and Russian sources claim that the experiments took place from the close expertise of Dr. Erich Traub, who worked for the Nazis and has been in the U.S. since 1945. And let's not forget that since 1945, the CIA has been supporting the backward Nazis in Ukraine, and with the collapse of the USSR, it did so openly until the culmination when they took over part of the government in Ukraine. And we could see the applause of support for such a current in the Canadian Parliament. President Trump's statement that Zelensky is a dictator, and the decision to conduct negotiations directly with Russia without Ukraine and the EU is legitimate, given that Zelensky has no legitimacy. He suspended elections, according to independent media, persecuted and imprisoned political opponents, censored the media and dealt with journalists, closed religious facilities and the clergy of Orthodox churches and monasteries, and even before the conflict banned the Russian language, money and civil liberties pro-Russian orientation. On the other hand, in recent years, apart from Russophobia, since 2014, the EU has been turning a blind eye to the shelling of Donbass and using the Munich agreements to buy time for Ukraine to arm itself, and with literal obedience to the US administration, it has not taken any step towards peace. Ukraine's participation is also not acceptable because it has no right to any demands and trumps on which to formulate demands. On the other hand, Putin clearly stated his pre-negotiation demands: the withdrawal of the Ukrainian army from the territories of Donbass, Luhansk, Kherson area, and Zaporizhia to the administrative line before the outbreak of conflict. The second point is the guarantee that Ukraine will never join the NATO alliance. In order to negotiate and achieve peace, President Zelensky offered his resignation. However, in the past years, there were rumors that he negotiated the protection of the American Secret Service and asylum, and for this purpose, he also bought a villa in Florida through offshore companies, which were the subject of an investigation in those years, and the public found out. Then it was announced that in addition to real estate in Florida, he also owns expensive real estate on the coast of Italy and in London. The question remains whether the Russian and American services and agencies will treat him with justice and prosecute corruption. Dissatisfaction of the EU due to being rejected from the process of peace negotiations, because participating would also ensure the satisfaction of its interest in the soil of Ukraine. It resulted in the recent meeting of EU leaders in France, from which came the initiative and support for the UN resolution condemning the Russian war against Ukraine, for which the US did not vote, but announced its resolution in which Russia is not addressed as an aggressor. What is inevitable in the near future is that American interests will be satisfied. In addition to the fact that all financial aid was returned to the American economy, especially the military-industrial complex and partner companies, Ukrainian remains a debt that will be repaid with natural resources and labor. The American corporation BlackRock will lead the reconstruction of infrastructure and other economic entities, and President Trump will negotiate concessions on the exploitation of rare minerals. In the future, we can still expect, since Elon Musk is a part of the current administration, that the first technocratic state will be created on the soil of Europe, like some experimental cities in China. Ukraine may have the first AI government and administration in the world. Thanks for watching, hit like and subscribe for more, and I wish you all the best.